Vandals. Go Vandals.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs at the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dallas Hammer. No producer Martin today. He is away at Seducer Camp. We'll hope for a full report when he's back, hopefully next week, maybe the week after. We'll see how long that camp goes.
Well, he's running it, so I hope he has a report.
Well, we'll see. But that voice, you guys know and love him. It's Bryan Marceau. Bryan, how are you doing?
Doing well, dude. Hey, conference tournament ended yesterday. That's why we pushed this back, so we could, hit the season plus whatever takeaways there were from the conference tournament, which to me, there are a lot. But look, we're in this weird spot where basketball season's over. We have a teeny gap between now and spring football. And then, as I always bring it up because I have trepidation, the great desert of Vandal sports between spring football and real football coming. So I don't know, man. It's bittersweet to have the season end, and it's not sweet at all for me to see that gap coming. But we're here. We got some live viewers. So what are we waiting for?
Yeah, as Bryan forgetting that we're going to talk about 45 minutes about West Ham's 5-0 victory against SC Freiburg today. Oh, man, we already lost Bryan. There we go. We're now talking. Bryan, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Idaho goes down to Boise for the first round of the Big Sky Conference Championship against the number 10 seed Sacramento State, number 9 Idaho. Bryan, what is there to say about this game? Obviously, from the tone of our voices, if you didn't know, Idaho lost this game. But Bryan, what do we even have to say about Sac State, Idaho, and Sac State's monumentous upset of Idaho?
And hey, you've got the tone there. Sac State was the 10 seed, but to close the season, Sac State was playing their best basketball that persisted into the tournament. Idaho was playing, to me, its worst basketball to close the year, which persisted into the tournament. The game was it was a competitive game, but Sac State pretty much led wire to wire with the exception of a couple moments. And look, let me put it this way. Sac State shot 39% from the field. It's great defensive effort from Idaho mixed with a not great offensive effort from Sac State. But it still wasn't enough. Sacramento State's a strong defensive team. Idaho is a weak offensive team. And there you go. I mean, Idaho only broke the final score is 72-64. Idaho did not break 60 until the result was in doubt. And Quinn Danker, who was like 2 of 14, 2 of 12 or something like that, he started.
Stat correction, 1 for 12.
1 for 12. Quinn Danker, when the game's over, makes a few shots. But look, hey, like Tom Kendall says, the top comment section, Julius Mims was easily the highlight of the game for Idaho. Goes 9 of 11 from the field, scores 20 points, picks up 7 rebounds, also had 2 blocks. Also impressive. Mims showed a face-up game that I didn't know he had, which we're gonna get to that point later in the episode. But Julius Mims had, to me, the best game of the season, but otherwise, the Vandals weren't ready for this. And look, you could even look at what Alex Pribble did with the rotation. The jury is in at the end of this game. Alex Pribble really wanted to win this game. He changed his substitution rotation significantly from what he did for the entire season. And in short, Pribble did not trust any guard who was not Quinn Danker or D'Angelo Minnis. Christian Gonzalez was in the game for 1 minute. Trevon Blassingame was in the game for 7 minutes. No other guard saw the floor. EJ Neal's a wing, but not exactly guard. He saw 33 minutes. But look, he barely went to the bench. That is, Alex Pribble barely went to the bench because honestly, we joked that this was a championship for Idaho. Pribble coached like he was, and Idaho didn't have enough. And again, like the culprit, Idaho couldn't score. Sac State actually was too aggressive defensively, and that kind of helped Idaho get some looks off dribble penetration. Then honestly, if I were Sac State's coach, Dave Patrick, I wouldn't have played that tough on pick and rolls. I would have just sunk and said, "Hey, guards win." But I say that it didn't matter. Like towards the end of the game, Idaho didn't break 60 points until the game was over, and Quinn Danker started hitting just jacket up shots at the end. So that's the takeaway, guys. The tone of last week's episode is that's how the game ended, Dallas. That's how the season ended. Idaho now it has been 7 years since Idaho has a Big Sky Conference tournament win.
Yeah, Bryan, and the thing with the Sac State game is it started out like, okay, hey, it's pretty close, it's pretty sloppy. We get to the first media timeout, and I think each team had 2 buckets apiece at that point. A pretty slow start, but then midway through the first half, Idaho's down 8 already to, again, the number 10 team. They ended up cutting it closer and ended up only down 3 going into the second half. But it was just the same old story, Bryan, of Idaho can't score, Idaho can't get out of their own way, and it was pretty apparent that what Idaho was going to do was hope that Mims and Rose are going to score a bunch of points. They got that out of Mims. They didn't quite get it out of Rose. He had 8 points. He had a respectable day. But when you're looking at those guys and hoping, hey, if we get into the high 30s here, we got a shot between these two guys. You got 28 points out of them, and you ended up losing by 8. It is what it is. You look at the guard play, and I hate to harp on Quinn Danker because I don't mean to call one guy out, but Bryan, Quinn Danker was 1 for 12 until the game was over. The game was no longer in doubt. You're muted, by the way. The game was no longer in doubt, and Danker hits his last 4 shots, which were the Vandals' last 4 shots, when the game was an 11-point game with 1 minute to go. It was 55-54. Game's over. Danker comes in, and he didn't come in because he was in the entire game, but he hit his last 4 shots to make it look respectable. They only lost by 8, made his stat look a little bit more respectable. He ends up going 5 of 16, 14 points, but
he made 4 shots in a row, go 5 of 16. And then, hey, to buttress what you're saying, to Bailey Nunn off the bench for Sacramento State cut up Danker quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. That was where I was going, is, you can survive a guy having a real rough night when shooting, when defensively he's locking guys out, but that's not what we saw, Bryan. Again, like you said, Bailey Nunn 14 points off of the bench, just essentially going right at Denker the whole time. And it's tough. Tom Kendall guard play is terrible. There's no other way to say that. It sucks, but we're at the point where we're talking about Vandal basketball the same way we've talked about it the last handful of years, Bryan. There's just not enough talent here to truly make that step into even the mediocre tier in the Big Sky. You're at the bottom, and you're just going to be at the bottom. As Jason Mayer in the comment section, Pribble dealt a tough hand in year 1, lots of room for improvement in year 2. I mean, I think that's what we're going to have to end up looking at, right, Bryan, is finding the hope for year 2, finding those building blocks, because right now this kind of turned out the way we expected. The cupboard's just dry and bare. Pribble did his best, but no real progress was made here, Bryan. At the end of the day, so one more win than last year, still a bad loss in the first round of the tournament.
I mean, let's close the book on this game really quick, so we can talk about other takeaways. Because I agree with what you're talking about, wins and loss total, but I think there's more micro takeaways that wouldn't back up that. But to close this game out, like I said, Mims goes 9 of 11. The rest of Idaho combined to shoot 15 of 45. You're not going to beat anyone. Absolutely no one doing that. And hey, one takeaway that I had from watching the Big Sky Conference tournament is, like you said, Idaho was just outclassed guard-wise by the entire league. Every single team. Idaho State, athletically guards outclassed Idaho. Sacramento State, not the best guard play in the world, significantly better than Idaho. Look at every single team that. Look, this Big Sky Conference tournament had a ton of upsets. Okay, Montana State ends up winning the turn. They won the tournament last night. They're the 5 seed. On Idaho's side of the bracket, there was not a single win by the better seeded team until in the semifinals, Montana State beat Sacramento State. Prior to that, every single game on Idaho's side of the bracket was an upset, including Eastern losing to Sacramento State, who beat Idaho. But this was a tournament that if you were hoping to make some noise as a lower seed, this was the single most beneficial tournament in that matter that I've ever seen. I probably ever will see. And yeah, Idaho's out the first round. So look, I think that's a fair way to close talking about the game, because it's more important to me than just that single game are broad takeaways. And look, you already brought it up. You just want to hit it a single time so we don't have to feel like we go over this again. So when we're talking about what went well, what did not, hey, we already acknowledged. Pribble's hired March 20th of 2023. That means he pretty late in the recruitment cycle. No one who contributed from the 2022-23 team stayed. So it's a completely bare cupboard, very different than like what Matt Logie at Montana State had, where, hey, Big Sky Conference Tournament MVP Robert Ford III, that was a Danny Sprinkle recruit. So when we're talking about what Pribble had, we know it started late in the cycle with absolutely no returners whatsoever. Only want to say that once so we can stick to the takeaways. But like you said, look, there's probably one side we'll spend a little bit more on. Dallas season as a whole. Starting off, what went well in 2023-24?
I mean, Idaho passed the eye test, at least certainly better than they did the previous year. That to me is step one. The basketball was better to watch. There's more of a consistency there rather than, hey, we're going to give, I forgot his name, Moffitt, excuse me, Devontae Moffitt, rather than Devontae Moffitt's going to take the ball and use it 80% of the time, and Isaac Jones gets the other 20%, rather than we're going to build this team around these two guys and win 10 games on the way to doing it. I liked the brand of basketball better. The talent I thought was worse, which again is what happens when you have a lame duck coach out almost all of his season, not do a particularly great job at recruiting because, again, lame duck coach. And then you bring Pribble in late in the process, and you kind of just wash this season away. Mark Trevelpriest from the Corner Club is saying fan support was better. I would absolutely hope that. I did not make it down to Moscow for a game, but I don't know if it could get much worse than the support that was at the end of the Kloss era, just based on, again, people checking out after 4 years of just terrible basketball. Tom Kendall in the comment section, Mims Linhart played better D. Tyler Maris looks promising. EJ Neal improved over the season. And you can say that. I see there's an individual guys that we're hoping are going to be good building blocks here. Julius Mims, I thought, was a very good player. Tyler Leinhart, hopefully healthy, hopefully good the next couple of years. EJ Neal's turning it around. That's what I'm at least positively looking at, Bryan. There's not a lot of metrics behind these things, but at least on the surface, the eye test, the basketball is better. There's at least talent here that should hopefully be a couple nice pieces to have on next year's roster. This doesn't feel like a Zach Kloss hit the reset button, completely new roster every single year. Doesn't quite feel like that's what we're going into.
Yeah, so I agree the team passed the eye test of one. Obviously, this was a better defensive team. So like we saw Idaho early in the year, Idaho looked like defensively they might be pretty good. That will hit part of why that was mitigated later on. But for sure, there was much clearly better strategy. Clearly, the guys played pretty damn hard on both sides of the ball the entire year. So, hey, you said eye test, basically passing the eye test of, does Pribble look like he knows what he's doing? Yeah, Pribble knows what he's doing. So that's I guess that's the other takeaway is, hey, first year coach at the D1 level. How do we feel about the hire after a year? No coach is more popular than before coach in their first game, right? Unless you're Jason Egg. So I feel happy with Pribble being on the bench. I want to push a little bit more on what Tom Kendall said. We did have some individual players show significant improvement. Tyler Leinhart to me pops out. He played 18 minutes a game on the season and averaged just under 9 points a game. Those are, if he's able to maintain that kind of production over increased minutes, we're talking about a solid number 3 or number 2 scorer in the Big Sky. So that's Leinhart's a piece who can play in the post. And you compare Leinhart to the start of the year, and yeah, he got hurt, so that did diminish a little bit of his results. But you compare him start of the year to the end of the year, he clearly made some strides. Clearly became a much more comfortable offensive player. Look, the start of the season, I didn't even know how the dude was a D1 player. Now it's because he clearly was not. He just hadn't really found his footing yet. Once he did, you saw he had post moves. You saw he could put it on the floor. You saw he's a willing passer. You saw he was trying to get better at defense. All those are pluses for Leinhart for sure. EJ Neal, Tom Kendall, yeah, he's another guy who he didn't hit his stride till later in the year. And junior college dudes, or like Leinhart was a D1 guy from Washington who didn't play. So this is his first year as far as I'm concerned. EJ Neal's a JC transfer from San Francisco. Sometimes JC dudes take a while for things to click. You could tell things clicked for EJ about 2/3 of the way through the season. Mims was kind of the rare exception of he clicked immediately. And you could see what he brought to the table right away. So we did see guys improve over the course of the season for sure. Another takeaway to me that's positive is now to close the season, team face planted for sure. We've already covered that, and we'll probably hit on it later. But you compare how the team was playing early towards the end prior to those final 4 games. Oh, this team clearly showed improvement, which, hey, that's kind of new. And to me, that's evidence of, look, this is a solid coaching staff. They have limitations that we'll talk about, but relative to what the coaching staff is working with, they were willing to be inventive. They were willing to tinker around with the starting lineup. A huge credit to Pribble with moving the starting lineup a ton, because he needed to. He needed to see what pieces were going to work and what pieces were going to score. Plus, there were injury issues. So credit there to Pribble of being willing to go back to the drawing board, something we need. And again, hey, talking about passing the eye test, a coach who will consistently revise what their game plan is to try to change things up. Box check, man. And then I guess to close some of the positive, which and I'm going to ask you a couple questions more, so we're not just done with this, is Idaho got to 11 wins, not a home run, but did beat the threshold of the max level clause it had, not by much. But the team there's enough positives throughout the season that this is just a Vandal experience of being behind the guy on the bench. When we got into the conference tournament, I mean, this was the first conference tournament where we're talking about, hey, what if Idaho wins? We're not talking about this as a thing to get through. This was the first time Boise for me since the tournament's been in Boise. This is the first time prepping for this tournament. There is excitement to me and disappointment at the conclusion of the season, instead of thinking, well, of course they lost. What else are they going to do? So those are some of the big boxes that we checked. I guess. I got to hit one too. Getting that Idaho State win. hadn't beaten Idaho State since pre-COVID. So like that, I mean, Idaho State, look, they didn't light the world on fire, but already covered that Idaho State outclassed Idaho guards. So there, to me, there's an obvious talent discrepancy between Idaho State and Idaho, and Vandals finally picked up a W. So, hey, that's a big deal. But before we hit the other half of this, which is very easy to talk about when a team wins 11 games on the year, Dallas, give me your high point of the year.
Honestly, the high point of the year, it's hilarious, but the Montana State Sac State win, back to back over the course of 3 nights, that was the high point, Bryan, to me. Back to back conference wins is not something we have seen a whole lot of the last couple of years, and it really did feel like that team was turning a corner there. That was right there at the end of that 8-game just slide through. Again, they picked up the win at Sac State to start the conference season, and then just 8-game slide, including a out of conference loss to St. Thomas. That to me was the high point. There was that 3-point loss to Montana that preceded that. It was like, oh, hey, Idaho's turning the corner. We even talked about it on the show. Like, hey, this might be it. This might be the point where the coach is helping develop guys enough to a point that maybe Idaho could win a couple more games here. Maybe they're not going to be the 9-10 game. Maybe they can step up. Maybe they can move a little bit forward. Maybe, hey, maybe we can win a game. Maybe we could even win 2. Like the optimism came back to Idaho basketball for the first time since, honestly, the second to last year of Don Verlin. That to me was the high point. There's not a whole lot of high points on the season, but again, I know it was Montana State and Sac State who ended up being the conference champion, and then a team that made an incredible run, getting 2 wins in the conference championship. But to me, that was the high point. It was the first time that we had really felt, hey, there are things to build from here. Yes, this is not a perfect squad. Yes, a lot of this is going to have to change over. But for the first time in years, we can see positive progress for the Vandals.
Yeah, and it wasn't the faux positivity where like you're suspending your disbelief, or you're suspending your analysis to say, okay, well, it's my team. I want to act like there's something coming on here. This Vandal team, look, they only had 2 winning streaks. Only two winning streaks that I'm going to truly acknowledge, because we don't care about sub D1 games. So I'm ignoring that, because we always will do that no matter who the coach is. Idaho had 2 winning streaks on the season. There was the out of conference run of beating Cal Poly Pacific and then Utah Tech, which, look, after that Utah Tech win, Idaho lost 10 of their next 11 games. So I know we talk about 8 as a losing streak. That was a long run of losses. That the entire month of January, Idaho comes away with no wins. So that's, and again, hey, that run started in December. So that was
the middle of December.
That was a long desert for this team to run through. But when Idaho turned temporarily, at least, a corner after that 8-game streak and played 500 ball for about a month, that to me was, hey, that was Pribble showing his ability to get the team to persist, his ability to keep going back and refining. That was part of where a lot of the lineup tinkering took place. That to me was a combination of individual player growth. Guys like, hey, Kyson Rose played some of his best ball after that 8-game losing streak. Linhart had some of his better. Now, he missed some of that run of 4 games, but Linhart had some pretty good outings in there as well. Denker was up and down. As that's just, if Denker's going to get this usage, he's going to be up and down no matter what. So there's nothing there, but he had some nice games in there too. So it felt like it was earned enthusiasm, earned excitement. And then, look, the bottom just dropped out, and the bottom dropped out to me largely because of overall talent on the roster. So there's that part to it. I'm going to say my high point, Dallas. Hell, man. Honestly, dude, it was, I think it was getting that Idaho State win. It was an ugly as hell win. But that was, dead center after the Montana State Sac State wins, and then recovering from 2 close losses to Eastern and Weber. To, again, just anytime Idaho showed that this team is ready to rebound, or this team is going to show, determination, whatever term connects with you. Idaho showing fight That to me was what was magnetizing about this team, was the ability to continue to fight throughout the year prior to the final few games. So, man, just beating Idaho State, it's incredible. Idaho State is not like some big sky power, guys. I mean, the Idaho State was what their seeding was, number 8. So they still played in the first 2 games of the tournament. But I mean, that's just, we at some point on the show, we were optimistic about, or we were softer on the team, because to me, that was the right call with what expectations should be for Vandal basketball. But Idaho State's not a powerhouse, and turning it around and picking up a real gritty, tough win, playing, that was an Idaho 55-53 is a score of that game. That's the game Idaho State would probably rather have. And Idaho still persisted through. That to me was a big deal. We have another part to get to. But last thing I want to ask you, Dallas, in spokesman review, in interviews after the season-ending loss, Alex Pribble brought up, hey, he's trying to build a culture here. He expects the majority of the team to be back. Now, hey, phase 1, no coach who's not Charlie Ragle is going to say anything other than that for the most part. And we know the era we live in, there's going to be transfers. That just works. And we know that the team needs more talent at certain positions, that internal improvement is not going to be enough. If you watch the Big Sky Conference tournament, that was clear. But I expect I know what your answer is here, but the tone of that coming from the coach this season, how did that connect with you?
So before we hit that, Brian, I do want to quickly just go through the quick February run, because we both picked high points of February. So for anybody that's listening that doesn't know the schedule off the top of head, in the month of February, Idaho lost to Montana by 3, then had the Montana State, Sacramento State wins that I said was the high point. Lost to Eastern Washington, number one for the regular season, by 8. A Weber State game that I don't believe actually got played. I think that was actually canceled, and all of us are just remembering dreams of that game. On a serious note, that was the one that Idaho had the
no. Tom Kendall's 100% right. No, that was the game where I figured we'd hit that in the second half. Remember that famous collapse that none of us will ever see a collapse of that level again? That's Brian, what Tom's talking about.
I was making a joke, Brian, we pretended that game didn't happen because that was so bad that, yes. Anyways, awful collapse against Weber State in the middle of that, but then recover with the win against Idaho State. That's when we thought, hey, look, you lost close enough to Eastern. You collapsed against Weber State, but close loss against Montana. Thought that we're moving forward here, and then lost 14 points to Northern Colorado, beat Northern Arizona by 10, lost to Montana State by 14. So up and down in the month of February, we began 4 and 5. Honestly, one of the best months we've seen out of Vandal basketball in a very long time. Sorry, Brian. I just wanted to give a quick shot of February for anybody that's listening and we're like, when the hell did Idaho win these games? Because I know that there are people, again, as somebody who used to be a listener before he was part of the show, sometimes when you're listening to the audio, it's like, wait, you get kind of lost in there. So again, February, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. So 4 and 5 in the month of February.
So in short, for both of us, that the month of February was the highlight of the season.
Yes, exactly. Because again, it is the best month Idaho's had in a very long time. It was almost 500 basketball, and the fact that we're talking about being happy about almost 500 basketball is sad. But Brian, to go back to your question to me, look, Pribble can't just come out and say, hey, most of these guys suck and we got to get rid of them. Like, who would ever want to play for that guy? When you're recruiting in the future, and all you have to do is Google Alex Pribble, and you can find a quote about him trashing a previous team. It's not typically how coaches are successful. You can get away with it a little bit more in the professionals because they're pros, they're getting paid to be there. College kids, good luck. But yeah, Brian, I would expect a majority of the roster to come back. There's 15 spots on the roster, and I would expect 7 of them to be gone. That's what I'm reading into this as. That's what I'm hoping this is. I am not hoping that this is. I mean, again, that's terrible. Like we thank Vandals for their contributions to the school when they're here, but Brian, there are a lot of guys on this squad that probably shouldn't be coming back next year. And it just is what it is. If you want this team to make a turnaround, Alex Pribble has turned schools around before, not at the D1 level, but has had rebuilding projects before. You got to think if you're looking at year 2, what do you do? Hey, Julius Mims was a good piece. Linhart and Neal look like they're good pieces. Again, Kyson Rose had some moments. Christian Gonzalez had a couple moments, but really outside of that, not a whole lot of positive takeaways here. D'Angelo Minnis is gone. I don't know Taryn Frank's status. I think he's still got 1 year of eligibility because he didn't walk on senior day. Titus Yearout didn't unfortunately show us much. We're at the point of a lot of these guys have got to make incredible strides next season, or we're looking at bringing some fresh faces in.
Yeah, so the reason I brought up is like, hey, Jason Eck recently interviewed Dennis Patch and just brought up that, hey, essentially it's hard to build a program now. It's a season by season. Football is a different monster than basketball. I like the front facing tone of, look, we're gonna keep a good amount of our guys and build within. And I like that language because I just don't think, unless you're John Calipari, I don't think you can do anything other than describe that. And the reality of, again, look at Big Sky teams. Every team that's good for Big Sky in basketball, it will always be a combination of solid returners and new guys. That's the world we live in. So I guess I mostly like the forward facing, the way Purple talks in public. I like how he sounds. He sounds like a person where I can understand him sitting in front of parents and parents saying, yeah, I trust this dude. Not just because student athlete wants to play basketball in Idaho, not just because there's a pretty gym, but because sounds like a sharp guy who has some real answers. We have a second half of this to get to, Dallas. Before we get there, there's something that always brings a smile to my face. There's something that always brings a twinkle to one or two of my eyes.
Why did my camera just turn off? Whatever. Are you talking about pristine bitches, Brian? Because boy, have I got plenty of those for you. If you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Just look on the screen. Look at all these smiling faces. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway. You can even check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and just like the guy on the screen, fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire country. Just bring your clothes and let HRE handle the rest, guys. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now, 406-540-4450. Again, 406-540-4450. Or check them out at hughesriver.com. Brian, the second half. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? We're now talking about what went wrong with Vandal basketball this year. I'm going to let you start because if I start, I might not stop. Brian, you're muted again.
Well, that's going well. We'll want to hit some more specific points because, hey, we already talked about some general stuff early on. So specifically, the very first thing I want to hit on that it's just not possible to miss this watching Idaho is Idaho is a terrible offensive team, guys. Look for what we talk about Klaus and look, hey, this is a good thing that we missed hitting a little bit more. Objectively, this team was less talented than the last two Idaho teams, and Pribble got an extra win. So that's evidence of positive coaching. But the downside is in Pribble's first year with the best facility in the conference, he recruited a significantly less talented roster than to the second, both of Klaus's third and fourth years. And Klaus got fired. So why did we get results that we got? Because this team did not have anyone approaching all Big Sky talent whatsoever. Juice Mims did make all defensive team. Congrats to Juice. But look, not even an honorable mention. So not even guys getting multiple votes because they should not have. This was just objectively, especially the guard spot, not a talented Big Sky team whatsoever. And you saw it in the output on the season. Idaho in the Big Sky season averages 64.9 points per game. Second worst in the conference, had the worst scoring margin in the conference at -7.3. These are just conference games I'm talking about. Ken Palm ratings, which we don't obsess about analytic ratings, but you guys know, hey, analytic ratings just combines your record with who you played to try to give you a more complete picture. So not saying this is the holy grail or anything, but your eye test this year showed that Idaho played hard, played kind of tough defense, but they could not score. And it's hard to be very good if you can't score. Well, out of about 352 D1 teams, Idaho, or 362 D1 teams, 363. Idaho finishes Ken Palm number 321 this year, which is 21 spots worse than 2023. And offensive rating, this was a way worse offensive team than last season. The 259th best offensive team last year. The team was at least top 100 offensively, which, hey, you got a Pac-12 first team all Pac-12 dude. You should be higher up there. But that's to say the guys Pribble could get to come to Idaho could not score the ball. And Pribble did try a handful of different things, but this team, they couldn't score. They beat 80 points, 3 or 4 times total. That was the phase one biggest takeaway. Then I'll throw it over to you for extra stuff, Dallas, is it doesn't matter. Look, unless you're an elite level defensive team, you can't score. You can't have it be tough for you to score 70 points a game. And that's who Idaho was. Idaho did not score 65 a game because they slowed offense down on purpose. They played a pretty average pace overall. They scored the way they did because they weren't any good on the offensive side of the ball. And they were an incredibly easy team to game plan against, not because of Pribble making mistakes, but because there were only so many answers to the Idaho offense and other Big Sky coaches who were good. I mean, look at the coaching in the league right now. It seems about as good as it's been for a little bit. They get to watch the same tape. And Idaho was not tough to stop offensively, which eventually leads to, doesn't matter how tough you are on defense. If you can't push back when other teams eventually score, you are going to lose. Your defense is going to tire out, and you're just going to have games peter out the way they did, Dallas.
Yeah, Bryan, you look at the numbers. Idaho shot not significantly worse than they did in 2023, but shot worse all across the board. Worse field goal percentage, worse 3-point percentage, worse free throw percentage. They shot almost 100 threes more than they did the previous season and still scored less points. Just unfortunately, like you said, Bryan, when you have few things you can do offensively, you're just so much easier to game plan for. We've harped on the guard play for every time we've talked about Idaho basketball this year, but when your guards can't penetrate and they're not exceptional 3-point shooters, what do you really have in them? And that's what the story of this season came down to, is you don't have a lot of great ball movement, you don't have a lot of penetration, you don't have a whole lot of shots falling. So when you're stuck with that, yeah, Julius Mims had a great year, all Big Sky defense. Unfortunately, he wasn't Isaac Jones, so he moves on to go start for a Pac-12 school that's going to make the tournament and might even make some noise in the tournament, might get Kyle Smith out of Pullman because of the job he's done over there. Tom Kendall saying also can't break the press very well. Again, I'm pretty sure we don't talk about that game anymore, but we've seen that happen in crunch moments. We've seen that happen in not crunch moments. Even Portland State just right before the tournament, the second that they lost their 10-point lead, it was, hey, let's put the press on and get it back up to 15, and we don't have to think about Idaho again. It's tough, Bryan. It's tough to see. Yes, Pribble seems to have done a better job because, again, he got more out of these guys than, again, his now best and worst season as the Idaho head coach, because he's only had one. Still won more games than Zach Kloss did in his absolute best season. But we're still looking at this and being able to compare those two squads as pretty similar. There's only one win difference between the two of them. Defense rating a little bit better for Pribble's team. Offense rating much worse. That's also fire away.
I'll say, like, objectively now, because hey, we always, just so we're not brain dead, this team, we always do eye test plus stats is what we're talking about. So just want to throw the little asterisk of this was an objectively better, more sophisticated defensive team. But even in spite of that, offensive struggles, it makes it hard to execute.
You end up in the same place in Ken Palm. The 68 best teams in the quote unquote 68 best teams in the country make the tournament. Well, if there was a worst 68 that was playing in a toilet bowl, Idaho would be a shoe-in for that over the last handful of seasons. And that's exactly what happened this year. There was not a significant step into a midfield. It was just more of, again, just bad basketball. And there's only so many ways you can say this is bad basketball and you need better players. That's what this comes down to. It's unfortunate, but we're still looking at, really, Bryan, if Idaho wants to fix things and turn things around, you gotta hope that Pribble has done a better job recruiting in year 2, where he's had the full season to recruit, rather than picking up the cupboard March 20th and finding there's nothing in there. We've got to stuff it before the season.
Yeah. So another thing I want to say, and hey, this also is half in the what went well, and I'm blaming it on Jason Eck in a good way, is at the start of the season when Idaho picked up that run of 3 wins. I feel like that was one of the points in the year where there was hope and confidence in the fan base that, hey, this team's turned it around. And I say I blame this on Jason Eck because I was the same way. I think a lot of fans were. We were still watching or cashing in on the football season in the out of conference basketball year. Idaho's 11 wins, a pretty big collection of not impressive wins whatsoever. So the run of 3 wins I talked about was Cal Poly Pacific, Utah Tech. Cal Poly finished the year 3-28, number 338 in KenPom. Pacific, coached by former Idaho fired coach Leonard Perry. And hey, spoiler alert, who could have possibly seen that Pacific would struggle with Leonard Perry on the sidelines?
Who did get fired in the middle of the year.
Yep. Pacific goes 6-26, good for number 358, aka the 5th worst team in the nation, according to KenPom. Then Utah Tech, which that seemed like a big win at the time. Yeah, Utah Tech, they finished 285 in KenPom, 11-20 on the year. If you go through the entire run of Idaho's 11 wins, 6 of them were either sub D1 2, or 5 of them. So that's 7 total awful wins. 5 of the D1 wins were against teams rated 300 or worse in KenPom. So just the wins in the out of conference that we got excited about, 100% fool's gold. Those were terrible teams that Idaho, in some cases, Idaho beat the shit out of Pacific and beat Cal Poly pretty bad, but also like, hey, barely beating Utah Tech, not anything to get ecstatic about. Look, the best win Idaho had on the year was, it's funny to think about this. I'm just talking about quality. I'm not talking about emotional response. And emotional response is actually what matters when, people remember seasons. Early in the out of conference, the win over UC San Diego, that was the on paper best win the Vandals had all year. UC San Diego finishes 21-11, number 120 in KenPom, as a reference point that in the Big Sky, that would be the best team. They finished above Eastern Washington, that analytic metric. So like, hey, take that for what it is, but at least acknowledge it means UC San Diego is a pretty solid team. So that was the best win of the season for Idaho. But hey, what did not go well? I mean, Idaho just showed, we've talked about this now, but hey, stats meet the eye test. Who is Idaho competitive against? Largely teams that are very bad. Who is Idaho able to beat? Largely teams that are pretty damn bad. There were 2 kind of exciting wins on the year total, beating Montana State, who won the Big Sky Conference tournament. But hey, in KenPom, they're still number 213. So that's, around the middle-ish, not quite to the median value of, teams in the nation. So yeah, not if this was that Claus team, we'd be talking in an angry way. But again, like, hey, we understand expectations, but I guess the way to close this single topic right here about the schedule is what did not go well. Well, the excitement was mostly fool's gold. It was mostly excitement over beating pretty bad teams who, if you're okay at all, those should be penciled in as W's right away.
Yeah, Bryan, at the face of this, it's the strength of schedule was almost identical to 2023. You add a higher point there because you have Wazoo back on the schedule, and Wazoo is going to make the NCAA tournament. Like, that's great for them, but that's a very good team that you played. Outside of that, it's the same strength of schedule. You had 1 more win than you did the previous year. We spent the last handful of years complaining that Zach Claus was loading the schedule up with cupcakes to try to get those wins. But then, unfortunately, what's the schedule this year? A bunch of cupcakes, and Idaho does the same thing. That's, I think, the most frustrating thing to me. Now that we've looked back at it, the advanced numbers say, hey, yeah, congrats on beating Cal Poly and Pacific back to back. That's really cool that you did that. It doesn't mean a goddamn thing because those two schools didn't combine for 10 wins on the year.
Yeah. And then a final, well, not exactly final, but like a broad subject takeaway. We've talked about it in different ways. And I've acknowledged this, but I just call it a fact at this point. If Idaho's going to turn it around, about half these guys are not going to be here. If you just look at what we have as far what Idaho has, and I'm going to bring in the Big Sky Conference tournament as a reference point. I've hit it exhaustively, so I'll just go hit this quickly. Idaho does not have talented enough guards to have a prayer to be competitive. Just absolutely no shot. Quinn Danker is leading scorer on an okay Big Sky team. Quinn Danker might be the first guard off the bench. Certainly can't be the number one offensive option. I say might because there's like Idaho State. I don't think he would have been the first guard off the bench for Idaho State.
Brian, I will push back on that a little bit. I don't personally believe that's the case. I don't think Quinn Danker is a contributing guard on a top half Big Sky school. We've talked about PER in the past, player efficiency rating. For anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's again, just another analytical tool. John Hollinger created it. He was an ESPN writer. He works for The Athletic now. He was the Memphis Grizzlies like vice president of whatever for a decade or so. PER is very heavily weighted towards offense. But the one issue with the metric. So if you're doing well offensively, it does boost your numbers a little bit. But in the way that PER grades out, Idaho had 3 guys listed as rotation players or better across the season. Julius Mims tagged out as what in the NBA would be all-star. Tyler Linhart as a third option, and Kyson Rose in the rotation. The rest of the guys did not make it to anything considered an average or better player based on PER. Now, that's across the whole season. I think a guy like EJ Neal, you look at his conference PER, and it's considerably higher than his all-season PER because he did improve at the end of the season. Yeah. But, I mean, you have, again, Quinn Danker, D'Angelo Minnis, EJ Neal, Takai Hardy, Christian Gonzalez that are either listed as non-rotation or fringe roster guys, and then Trayvon Blasingame and Titus Yearout listed as shouldn't stick on the roster. That's just a dead zone of guard play.
No, and to further contextualize that, Dallas, you got like guys like Takai Hardy. I can completely understand where he develops, and by the time he's a junior, senior, he's an energy guy, like not number one scoring option, but every team needs guys who are tough, who play good defense, who rebound and take the shots that are open. You can see, I can understand how Takai Hardy could develop into that. You brought up EJ Neal. EJ Neal had moments where he has the athleticism to start at other Big Sky teams. He just needs to not need to create offense. He's a 3-and-D player who, again, he was pushed up as far as what he would be used offensively towards the end of the year because of what Idaho has. So again, not trying to bail on everyone, but what the overall takeaway I'd say is if you think Idaho is going to be good, you need Mims to get the ball more. And that's also another takeaway, man. Like I like Pribble. There's a lot of stuff he did. I think Mims was criminally underused. We didn't find out Mims could face up until the last game of the season. It's because he wasn't getting the touches. Now, if you want to call that a Pribble thing or a guard thing, I don't care of them not getting the ball enough. He's ultimately coach. If your best offensive player, as far as like efficiency score, I mean, Mims isn't a crazy offense guy that much, but he showed he could do more than he was allowed to do. He doesn't have to only catch the ball on oops, and he doesn't have to only shoot threes other than that. So, hey, throw that in there. But the initial point being, Mims has some development left in the tank. Tyler Linhart, he had moments where you could tell he could be a good scorer. Now he's got to get stronger if he's going to be a starter and a number 2, number 1 option in a couple of years. He's got some growth he's got to go through. He's got to become tougher. He was passive against Sacramento State. If he's going to be a go-to scorer and keep that efficiency he had this year off the bench, that stuff has to go away. But you understand the world where he could be a contributing piece on a good team. I don't see where any of the other guys have a case for how they could be a number 2, never mind number 1 option on a good team, which doesn't mean guys like Gonzalez couldn't become solid guys on a solid team. But for Idaho to become a solid team, it's going to be because of people who are not yet on the roster, who are not yet in Moscow, whose names we do not yet know, which means, hey, another takeaway, like you referenced, not a complete turnover, but there's no way around it. Pribble's going to have roster spots. Only one guy is for sure graduating, D'Angelo Minnis. There's no way he's going to go back next year with just one new guy. It's just not possible. We're going to have some guys either shift down to being walk-ons or not stay at Idaho, because this is the dude's career. He has a 5-year contract, so he has time. But you will not convince anyone who knows any basketball whatsoever that a couple all Big Sky level talents just weren't ready to play for this Idaho team.
Yeah, exactly, Brian. Well, and then we talked about Taryn Frank's the only senior that might be coming back, and D'Angelo Minnis is the only senior that's graduated. But then you get into the juniors, Rose and Mims. Can you expect a ton of explosion beyond what they're currently doing? I'd love to see Mims get the ball more, and then hopefully there is a step there. Hopefully Rose has a step.
You could understand Rose being a solid off the bench post.
Yes, exactly.
On a good team.
Coming back in for his senior year next year, yes, but that's where we're getting into now. Quinn Danker is a junior. Do we expect him to become an all Big Sky guy next season, taking one huge step from junior to senior year? This is the kind of math that Pribble's going to have to do here, because you get down to the sophomores. Okay, Linhart looked good. You think he's probably got a couple steps in there. Year out in Blasingame didn't really contribute a whole lot of positivity this season. Do those guys have an extra gear that they're going to show magically in their junior seasons, or unfortunately are those guys that you're looking at, hey, shifting to walk on, shifting to find another school if you want to play? That's the unfortunately the math that we're going to look at here. Takai Hardy and Christian Gonzalez both being freshmen, I would expect to see them come back because they're freshmen. Give them at least one more year to prove that they can contribute at this level. But this is where the math gets tricky, Brian. You've got a bunch of sophomores and juniors that are going to be juniors and seniors next year. Have they really proven enough to be solid contributors next year?
No, and look, the lack of patience you're hearing on our end is, again, every Vandal knew this was not going to be a Jason X situation in year one. But look, the year's done. To me, this is when the official clock starts ticking of what progress is going to be. And I say that because, hey, this season, though we had some high points, this is the 6th consecutive terrible basketball season for the University of Idaho. 1 for Verlin, 4 for Kloss, now 1 for Pribble, who, again, we all know the good parts, but end of the day, 11 wins. That's 11. That's 6 years in a row of bottom of the conference. It's been 7 years since Idaho won a Big Sky Conference tournament game. Rory Mayer in the comment section saying you have Clapper and Church coming up next semester too. Okay, well, no disagreement, Rory. Thanks for watching the show. You are our favorite current Vandal student. Shots fired, Patty. But if those two were going to be difference makers right away, they would have played. Doesn't mean they won't do something next year. But until we have evidence then playing, I can't tell you what it's going to be. But in addition to that run of the recent 7-year drought, no conference tournament wins. I mean, the realistic world we're living in, guys, Idaho has been a Big Sky Conference basketball competitor for the last decade. 2014, 2015. That's when Idaho came back. In a decade, and look, you have to count the COVID year because Idaho played their game and lost the COVID year. So these Vandals have not been shortchanged 1 second of their earned tournament basketball. The Vandals have 2 Big Sky Conference tournament wins in a decade. 2. Came over 2 separate years. So Sacramento State this year, the number 10 team in the Big Sky, they won as many conference tournament games this year alone as Idaho's done in the last decade. Idaho State, as many conference tournament wins this year as Idaho has in the last decade. Montana State, more wins this conference tournament 3 than Idaho's got in the last decade, which is a long way of saying, we love you, Patty. Long way of saying there is no little brother for Idaho basketball in the Big Sky. Like there just is not. There is
Brian, there's not many little brothers across the country.
No, man. So the impatience we have, and again, we believe in Pribble, but the impatience you're hearing is it's a decade, guys. It's a decade of no prayer at the NCAA tournament. Haven't made the NCAA tournament in over 30 years. That's so far away. It feels like it's not even worth referencing. So for me, I'm willing to accept that right now, until Idaho takes the next step, this is Idaho State football, and that you got to look at growth as a slow incremental process. I'm okay saying that, but I'm ready for a competitive basketball team. I'm ready for a team that has a prayer at 500, or like, hey, they finished a little bit below 500, but you believe they can pick up a conference tournament win or two like Idaho State did. I'm ready for that. We haven't had it for more than half a decade, 6 years. We have not had an even kind of okay basketball team. So I believe in Pribble, but man, we got next year. We got to start seeing some results. I mean, we have the best gym in the nation that we can't get that many people to. Whatever increase happened this year, like, hey, we're stoked about it. But until the Vandals start winning some games, we're throwing away the home court advantage in Boise if this basketball team was any good at all. Just like we've been throwing that away for 5 years, we're throwing away the best facility, and I'm talking noise too, because we only need that lower bowl full of energetic fans for this to be the best place to play in the Big Sky. We're throwing that away. This is another year. That potential advantage out the window. I'm ready to cash in a little bit on any of the advantages Idaho could have that we just don't.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Bryan, this is where we're at. This, not to pat ourselves on the back here, but the last couple of years, I have mentioned Matt Logie on this podcast and seeing the job he had done at D3 Whitworth and the job he did at Point 2 or at D2 Point Loma, and begged and pleaded that let's make a change here before Idaho basketball has driven itself too far into the ground. But Bryan, now here we are. Over the last 6 years, Idaho's averaging 7 wins a season, and it's not getting any better. 10 and 11 wins, great. Okay, double digits in back-to-back years. There's 30 games. That doesn't mean anything. This is just
with always 2 sub D1s in there too.
Yes, thank you. Again, if you're talking D1 wins, have not hit 10 D1 wins since, again, the Sanders, Blake, Calendray, Sanders, or Sherwood years. It's been a very long time since Idaho had 10 meaningful wins on the schedule. It's just tough. I'm cool with giving this as a wash, as saying, hey, look, we know that the previous guy left this cupboard very bare for Alex Pribble, but next year we got to see something turning around. Otherwise, if it's 2 years of what we saw Zach Kloss end his tenure with, if we get 2 years out of that to start with Alex Pribble, that's when I start to question if we're here 1 year from now talking about Idaho barely got to 10 wins again, embarrassed themselves in the conference tournament like always, and hey, maybe there's 2 or 3 guys that'll be good to come back for 2025, 2026. Then at that point, I would question what the hell we're even doing here, because again, this incredible new arena was built finally after it feels like decades of work, and there's nothing to celebrate with it. And now, again, women's basketball, if you're interested in women's basketball, Bryan and I are not going to get into that today because, again, men and women play at typically the same time. Unfortunately, we have committed to following the men's team, which feels like a punishment most days. But Martin and Patty recorded a women's basketball specific show. You are welcome to grab that on our channels. Should be the episode right before this one. But Bryan, our comment section is alluding to it. How about that Idaho football team? We've got 12 days till spring ball. We've got 12 days till happiness comes.
Yeah, I guess what I want to close talking basketball is hey, we do the reaction shows, guys, to state the subtext that a lot of people probably get. We let the emotional part come out too. And I'm saying that because, hey, when we get away from this basketball season, we get to the start of next basketball season, we see there's some new guys. Tone's going to be different because you brought up if next year doesn't change Dallas. I'm sure you don't actually believe this far away that that's going to happen. It's more that it's just because of the lack of progress this year that is now in the back of your head. Now, it's very easy to drive that away. Pribble gets some better guys. We already know he knows X's and O's. We know he's a tough dude. There's a lot to like about Alex Pribble. Even after 11 wins, I'm happy with what Idaho's got coaching wise. So I do believe we're going to see some stuff change, and Pribble doesn't have to have that much change for the tone of what we're talking about to be pretty dang different next year. It's just now, especially with how the season closed, when the team felt like they'd turned a corner. There's nowhere other way to put it. Leaves a sour taste in your mouth. So I think we're going to wash it out. And it's the easiest thing to wash out in the world. Get a few guys so that offensively this team's a little bit stronger. And suddenly that improved defensive tenacity and strategy that we saw is going to mean even more. So is there a path? Yeah, for sure. Is there a path for ICCU mattering? Yeah, I think it's overstated what all facilities matter in the Big Sky. I mean, look at Portland State. They've got second best facility. That hasn't mattered. What matters is getting the right guy in place. And hey, Portland State's making some growth because Jace Coburn looks like the right guy at Portland State. Talked about Matt Logie at Montana State. Hard to do better than winning the conference tournament in your first year. He started a month after Pribble, hired April 17th. So look, you get the right guy, things turn around. It turns around at different pacing for every single school. I think the broader takeaway for us is just accepting that basketball. Look, Idaho State won 2 games at the Big Sky Conference tournament for the first time since 1987. And that, as astonishing as that is, I think the way to wrap your head around this is to more accept Idaho just hasn't been a basketball powerhouse for the overwhelming majority of its time. And I'm talking last 35 years or so. So I hate to say it, but accepting patience-wise that within the scope of the Big Sky, Idaho basketball is Idaho State. It just is going to take time to rebuild, and accept that if 500 basketball could be around 500 basketball would be a huge step forward. But if we get it, we're going to be happy. We're going to have more people in the dome. Set your sights reasonably. And like you said, use football as the one to just go all in, lose your shit, know that the sky's the limit, and get on board.
Bryan, the one last thing I want to hit here, we've already mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but as we have considerably more viewers now than we did at the start, which I still think is Elon just buffing Twitter numbers. But thanks to our viewership has doubled over the course of this episode. Alex Pribble has done this before. He took over St. Martin's University. They weren't necessarily great when he took over. He slowly built them out, and then by the time he was done after 4 years, they were winning 25 games a year. They were constantly going to the D2 tournament. This is a guy who has done this before. This is probably the hardest rebuild he's going to ever have in his career, but I do believe Alex Pribble is going to be able to turn this around. But again, because there was no tangible turnaround immediately in year one, that is sitting in the back of the head for year 2 of hey, look, you got to get it going now, because we didn't see a whole lot of tangible progress in year 1. I mean, again, we passed the eye test here. There's definitely things we can look at as improvement, but a whole lot of things have to start turning around for year 2 and beyond to have the same hope that we had maybe at the beginning of day 1 of Pribble of hey, look, we got the guy. Let's see this turn into a dynasty in Big Sky basketball. You got to start seeing it next year.
Yeah. So you said it right. Let it all out. Get on board for next year. There's no reason to not be on board for next year, guys. No. We know we're paying attention to. So look, get excited as new guys come to the team, and then pay attention for next season. Patty, to buttress what Dallas and Patty are both saying, 100% sky's the limit. If sky means getting better, this team's going to get better. We know the recipe. If we know the recipe, obviously Alex Pribble knows the recipe. Just give it time. My version of that is let the disappointment we've held back for, maybe not held back, but didn't want to really jump in on when it's a new coach and you want the whole body of evidence to react to. Let it out. Get ready for next year.
With that, Bryan, any final thoughts on basketball or, again, spring football coming soon? Any final thoughts before we call this one done and over and this book is finally closed before we don't think about basketball again for a couple months?
I mean, no, I think we've covered basketball. I think it's hard to listen to an hour of this show and not know where we're at. But we still have look. There's a football story we'll talk about next week that we've chosen to hold on to because lots of football stuff is not time sensitive. Still got the volleyball thing that is not yet 100% resolved. Man, that's got to be done. I mean, okay, that's the other thing, man. With the reasonable excitement football is going to bring, Golick and Green have to shut some doors so that people can truly move on. But we have football stuff coming. We have volleyball coming. We'll be covering. Look, our big break comes June, July. So we're going to cover through spring football. Yes, Patty, I know you're talking about football now, but I guess here's not to open a new door, Dallas, but I guess here's the thing. We have football with the fights. We're going to talk about the fight next week, but like a not insignificant fight took place on campus involving football players. Big a deal enough that Golick issued a press release. Keep in mind, she still doesn't virtually no acknowledgement of the volleyball situation whatsoever. So that let that sink in.
Shocking how much faster she handled something with the football team than the volleyball team.
Yeah, but 100% there, Dallas. But let that sink in. The football story is big enough for a public response while volleyball is going on. While basketball face plants at the end of the year. If you're paying attention right now, it's just hard to be a stoked vandal. Please, for the love of God, guys, get these. Basketball's done. So this book is closed. Please get the other two things resolved, guys. So spring football can just be the excitement of spring football. We, as a fan base, we had just a shit ton of energy at the end of football season that was earned and deserved. And it was as good a time to be vandals as I can remember. We need to not squander any of that.
Well, good luck with that, because that's the Idaho way, Brian. We've seen it for months. This is the Idaho way. So, hey, you know what? Hopefully whoever replaces Terry Golick will do a better job of running the athletic department, because this is honestly a joke, Brian. I can't believe that volleyball is still going on at this point. Again, this has technically been going on since the winter of 2022. And here we are, still rudderless, just adrift at sea with one uber talented head coach in charge of that program. We're well into this, Brian, and we're at the point where I would go full unhinged rant about volleyball right now. So let's just call it a night. We're going to say go Vandals, and we're going to say, hey, spring football is around the corner. Hopefully some sort of justice prevails for the volleyball girls, and hopefully better days are on the horizon for the Vandals, because it's been a rough couple months.
It has. But with that said, Dallas, go Vandals.
Go Vandals.